Welcome back to my Witch series with Arc 5 of the Witch comic series, The Book of Elements. As you can see, I've decided to split this arc into 2-part videos, and I just want to remind you that I'm including the last chapter of Arc 4, which is titled New Horizons, because I just felt that it fit naturally into the Arc 5 beginnings. Something we're going to do differently is, because it takes so long for the plot to build up in the first half of this arc, we are actually going to focus on the girls' individual lives before we touch on the plot. I just want to start by saying Arc 5, I've read it completely already. If you don't know, I have read up to just a little bit into Arc 6 before I told myself to stop and do this series and try to actually have some surprises coming for me in the future arcs. So far, this one is my favorite arc that I've read so far. Eric and Heylin are having a lovely time discussing space. Heylin comments that living in an observatory is a great way to become a scientist. To this, Eric looks uncomfortable and says, "Scientist, sure. Astronomer, maybe." I'm unclear what that means. Later, as they all take a car ride, Eric's parents are discussing their hopes to begin a residency at a university in Open Hill, which is about 100 kilometers from Heatherfield. Eric is sad about this, but only says supportive things. Heylin can detect his lies, and it makes her feel sick. He sees this and comforts her. Not much later, they're in the same outfits and everything, it's announced his parents got the job. They leave in a few weeks, and Eric seems sad. Heylin says it must be tough to separate again. Eric indicates he might want to go with them. Their whole relationship flashes before Heylin's eyes. A few days later, he hasn't truly decided. They walk along the shore. Heylin nearly falls and he catches her. After the sweet moment, she begins to feel worry again. He begins to talk about lighthouses and equates her to one as his guiding light. But even after this, Heylin can feel a goodbye in the air. Change. He finally tells her he's decided to go. She supports him, but she doesn't want to. He says they'll be fine and reminds her they will be under the same stars. They share a tearful embrace as his family photo blows away, and I'm totally blaming Heylin for that. At school, she hides in a bathroom stall. Irma tries to cheer her up. It's not working. The day they depart arrives quickly. She shows up as they are packing the car, all the while thinking she can change his mind. She thinks him leaving means he doesn't love her. They've never said it to each other. Eric's mom is cheesy, and when she says, "It's always nice to see you," Heylin can again detect a lie. This seems to be a new ability of hers. Eric's mom is seemingly extra attentive as she goes to make some snacks. Eric explains that Heylin is the only person capable of splitting him from his parents. He shows doubt about leaving, and Heylin spends the whole time mentally begging him to change his mind. It appears that he's about to say, "I love you," when his mother bursts in with sandwiches. Heylin storms out. Eric breaks the previously seen astrolabe in the ruckus. As they're ready to leave, Eric stares off. At this same time, Heylin's mother checks in on her. She doesn't want to leave the house and uses her powers to slam the door. She dramatically sends a tear on the wind, asking the wind to stop him somehow. Sometime later, Cornelia and Irma are over to cheer Heylin up. She's a liability right now. Look at all this wind. Remember when I said she'll never adjust to loss properly? This is why. Now we get to see that in action with Eric. Irma decides to teleport them to Open Hill to placate her, and I honestly thought only Will was capable of that power. Open Hill is a beautiful suburban zone, and Eric happens to be edgelording out the window when they appear. He rushes to see them, but their magic malfunctions, and they get sent back to Heatherfield. Eric sends Heylin his old laptop and a letter where he professes his love. They can now video chat. Will has a funny exchange with the computer as she sets it up. And that's all we have with these two for now. This artwork also made him look a lot like Prince Eric. One day, Irma is babysitting her chaotic little brother Chris when she discovers a flyer for a dance school opening. She tries to invite Joel to go with her, but he says he'll be busy, not saying why, and that makes Irma angry. She tries to ask the other girls, and they're all busy, except for Taranee. Irma mostly wants to go to this school because the director is Carmilla's most famous choreographer, Kevin Jensen, and she's hoping Carmilla will show up. Judging by the crowd, so does everyone else. A special treat was promised, after all. She heads for the buffet just as Kevin Jensen appears, and she chokes on cookies as he introduces himself. She's swooning until he mentions his daughter. His daughter Sheila is their age and doesn't seem too friendly. He's called away and leaves Sheila with them. Irma immediately fangirls. Sheila has practically grown up with Carmilla, and Irma is in awe, saying she'd love to meet her. Sheila says she wouldn't want to meet Irma. From then on, Irma doesn't like Sheila, saying mean things about her and not liking when she starts hanging out with Taranee. And even worse, Carmilla never shows up. The special surprise promised were t-shirts. She runs into Joel not long after. He tried to show up, but he couldn't. He tries to make jokes, and Irma's still mad. She can't seem to cheer up. She's mad he didn't want to go with her. He starts to explain he had to babysit his younger brother. Irma starts laughing. She didn't know he had a little brother, and it turns out he's in the same class as her brother Chris, as they've both been recently tortured by playing cowboys and natives. This leads to a moment where it looks like they're going to kiss, but instead they hug. They walk off and have a cute conversation. Her stomach growls, and she learns that he can cook. If the band doesn't work out for him, he'll open a restaurant. And then he offers to cook for her someday. I really like this pairing. Sometime later, Irma has a vision that we'll cover later that almost causes her to drown. Joel gets so worried he doesn't want to teach her to surf anymore. She goes to one of Joel's concerts to support him and spots Martin. He's attending with his French pen pal that's visiting. Her name is Michelle. Later we see Michelle and Martin preparing for a Sheffield Institute celebration. She makes a move that causes Martin to drop things. They share a laugh. To me, she looks a lot like Irma, but blonde. She boops his nose, and they hug. Halen spots this, and immediately brings the gossip to the girls. Irma feels cast aside. Also, if you haven't been catching on, some strange goings-on are happening with the girls' powers. Of course, we're going to cover that in the plot section. Sheila starts at Sheffield Institute, and the guys swarm to her. Even the Grumper sisters try to recruit her. However, Sheila wants nothing to do with any of it, and she firmly requests to be left alone. Cornelia doesn't like her, and it's unclear if it's because of her grumpy attitude or because she seems to have dethroned her as class heartthrob, though I was sure that she didn't really care about that. Will giggles at Cornelia's annoyance and says jokingly, "Must be tough to see your flaws in others, isn't it?" They share a laugh. Truly, though, Sheila is very lonely. She just doesn't show it. Later in the arc, we see Cornelia asking to borrow a geography book from Taranee, all the while blushing. It's definitely an excuse to cross paths with Peter. There's a point in the plot where the girls are practicing their powers invisible at a market. There's an ice skating magazine that has photos of Cornelia. He purchases the magazine, by the way. Sometime later, we see Cornelia training for the championships. Her coach is proud that she chose her. When leaving, she misses her bus, and fatefully, Peter is driving nearby. He's transporting equipment for Cobalt Blue, as there's a concert tonight. Cornelia starts to get nervous because she hasn't given Peter an explanation. She never showed up to the beach party that he invited her to last arc. Well, she did, but she started to have a panic attack and left before Peter saw her. She called him from a payphone, and Peter can tell that it wasn't her caller ID from home, where she said she was. They don't discuss it, but it's also on his thoughts. She almost brings it up, but they talk over each other, and she doesn't push. He drops her off at Halen's, and that's it. When Taranee goes to the dance school with Irma, we find out that she used to dance in Sesamo. She sees Sheila's disdain for Heatherfield and relates, as she felt the same way once when she first came here. Apparently, Sheila's mother was from Heatherfield. They head into the dance rooms. Sheila smugly tells her not to worry. Not everyone can dance. They start the hip-hop music. Taranee seems to light up. Her nerves of being rusty leaving with each beat. She begins to smile, and the music takes over. Kevin Jensen, the instructor, is impressed. The whole group watches her. After the dance, Mr. Jensen approaches and acknowledges her talent, the fire of passion. Sheila slams the door as she leaves. Taranee leaves the dance school feeling invigorated, but she holds back her joy as we all know Irma didn't have as great as an experience. Peter can see the joy, and she tells him that she wants to attend the school, but is nervous about telling their parents. so Peter does it for her. He's able to sell it to their father, but their mother is a harder sell. Taranee is angered by this, and after an awkward silence, Taranee goes to her room to angrily write in her diary. Without much fanfare, her mother enters and says she can go to the dance school after all, leaving before Taranee can thank her. She begins practicing frequently. She must first audition to attend. She is again nervous. She says it's the most nervous she's ever been. The girls bring up other situations to have been nervous about, like tests and her first date, and it's funny that they don't bring up guardian events, like when she was Elian's prisoner in Arc 1. Anyway, she asks for their mental support all afternoon. As she heads to the audition, Sheila tags along. They're both nervous, and even though Sheila's dad is a judge, she must still audition. Taranee sees Sheila's fragile side, her fear of disappointing her father. She also sees her humor, though, and they share a snack on the way. Taranee's nerves are getting the best of her during practice. To make matters worse, she can hear everyone's thoughts all of a sudden. Before, she could only hear guardian thoughts. This shakes her further. She sees a mark on her arm. Heylin wrote the Silver Dragon's new phone number earlier. She begins to panic and tries to rub it off. A boy approaches. His name is Luke. He notices that Taranee's arm looks like it's been burned. She accidentally did this. He gives her his wristband to cover it up. He helps her to calm her nerves and gives her determination. It's her turn, and she's hyped now. The audition is here. She crosses her loved one's minds as she steps forward. This looks serious. We jump to later as she gets a phone call. She made it in. Nigel's there and holds her hand. She's excited and tells him this will be 3 afternoons a week. Nigel's suddenly furious about this, that she should have talked to him first. He slams his fist down. "You didn't think about us," he says. His hand was clearly hurt by how fast and hard he hit it down. He guilts her, saying, "When will we have time for the two of us? You didn't think about that." She doesn't know what to say. She embraces him and tries to be light. She realizes she didn't give Luke his band back. So without beating around the bush here, I want to call out Nigel right there for that massive red flag. His reaction was overly aggressive and violent. And might I remind you of his possessive older brother from Arc 3? Remember that Taranee's mother looked worried at the end of that arc? I recommend going back and rewatching that section in Arc 3. Teresa's worry makes a lot more sense now. Nigel seems to have fallen into the same toxic pattern. It gets worse from here. The first day of dance school arrives. Taranee is late. She is too nervous to enter the room. She misses the opening speech, and Mr. Jensen sees her on the way out and warmly welcomes her. Luke made it too. Flowers bloom across the page. Sometime later, Taranee's gushing to Nigel about dance class. He is obviously uninterested. She hears his thought about this, that he's annoyed that she talks about dance class so much. This surprises her, and she exits the bus quickly. Nigel follows. She asks him why he wants her to stop doing something she loves so much, and he starts to say, "I never asked you to, but..." He touches her shoulder. That she just told him on the bus was injured, and she yells out, "Don't touch me." Doing this was likely unintentional, as he looks scared about it, and she again reminds him about her shoulder. He storms off in a huff, saying, "Call me when you have time," which is a red flag, by the way, because he doesn't apologize for causing her pain and makes the situation about him, again guilting her for something she loves because it takes 3 days of their time, ignoring that he can still utilize 4 of those 7 days of the week. Sometime later, he waits outside the dance school to apologize, admitting to himself that seeing her happy with other people makes him unhappy, and that these people are stealing her from him. Red flag. Before he can apologize, she apologizes, saying, "I was on edge and treated you horribly." Taranee has been successfully gaslighted. In this case, this definition of gaslighting applies. To gaslight someone, you're manipulating how someone views a situation or the world around them, making them feel responsible for causing something they really have no control over, or are given the blame by the guilty person. Meaning, Taranee is apologizing to Nigel for his reaction. He hurt her shoulder, and she was only asking for him to respect her interests. He doesn't fix this apology and lets her take the blame for the argument. He gives her tickets to Cobalt Blue's concert that's that evening. They walk off happily, and Taranee shares more dance stories. Nigel has reserved special seats for them at the concert. From these seats, Taranee spots Luke and Sheila. Taranee is bothered by them being there together and tells Nigel she's running to the bathroom. Nigel notices the duo. Sheila catches up to Taranee and tells her Luke surprised her with tickets earlier that day. Taranee wants Sheila to just admit that she likes Luke. When Sheila starts to say that Luke was sad he couldn't find Taranee in time to invite her, and that Luke likely has a crush on Taranee, Now, here is a red flag from Taranee. Sheila asks about the guy Taranee is sitting with, and Taranee is hesitant to say he is her boyfriend. She then ditches Nigel to hang out with Luke and Sheila, without saying anything. Let's take a breath and talk about Sheila. The next morning, we see her prepping breakfast for her father. She looks out the window wistfully before lunging at her father for a hug. She finally feels happy here. We see photos of their family, and her mother seems to have died while Sheila was young. Her father apologizes for touring the world with her and not giving her a normal childhood. They are happy to start anew. Taranee and Sheila are becoming friends, but it seems that she is also forming a crush on Luke. When he goes to show her a dance move, her body is so warm, he burns his hand. I wonder if she's just hearing his thoughts about her and thus reflecting his feelings like they're her own unintentionally. At least I'm hoping. Either way, this is getting awkward. The gang is working to plan an event for the 100th year celebration of Sheffield Institute being open, and Taranee invites Sheila. Irma and Cornelia don't like this and leave, making Sheila feel sad. She's later seen painting a sign with them, though, so I guess they just deal. It's here that Nigel suddenly grabs Taranee's wrist, saying they need to talk. His anger is understandable, but grabbing her wrist is not. The group watches this with some shock, but do nothing as he pulls her away. He begins yelling. As we suspect, it's about being ditched at the concert. However, he puts all blame on their relationship being strained on Taranee. Sure, she has feelings blooming for Luke, but these don't seem to grow until after the arguments with Nigel, until after he is disinterested and possessive. Neither of them is guilt-free in this situation. Taranee cowers, and he says this is all because of the dance school, and that if she gives it up, things would be better. She says, if you cared about me, you wouldn't make me stop my passion. And he says, if she cared, she couldn't bear to spend any time away from him. Not healthy. He tells her to choose, saying she is his everything as he grips her biceps, a possessive, trapping move. Taranee speaks honestly, that she isn't sure she feels the same way anymore. A painful sentiment, but better than keeping that a secret. There is silence as she runs away. She cries underneath a tree. The narrator tells us,
sometimes love hurts, Puddin'.
Matt and Will are still on good terms. Suddenly, though, he brings up that when he had to lie to all of their parents, that it was the most lies he's ever lied before. Will starts to worry, of course. She begins to apologize, to say that she understands if he wants to leave, but Matt grips her excitedly. Apparently, doing that made him feel very useful. Way to stress us out, Matt. But Will is overjoyed. Later in the arc, Will can't focus on her studying. The washing machine is extra loud. Susan comes in to tell Will something, but she's late for a date with Matt. Will is yelling, and the machine only seems to be loud for her. Will is scrambling, but Susan wants to talk now. Whatever she needs to say is stressing her out, and now they're both yelling. Will's stress peaks and the washing machine explodes before she runs out. One morning, Will's phone tells her that she's got a message. It's from Matt, and he's saying happy month-iversary. Will is psyched he remembered, thinking he would be surprised by her gift. During the training we mentioned before, while invisible, Will saw that Matt wanted to buy a CD, so she got it for him. This same morning, Susan has crafted a plentiful breakfast. She's made it to help in delivering her big news to Will. Dean calls to help her with her nerves. Will walks in and Susan quickly hangs up. Matt shows up, surprising Susan. She suggests they meet up for lunch instead. Matt has crafted a scavenger hunt for Will. He takes her to where they met when she smashed his foot. She's enjoying herself so much she almost forgets lunch with her mother. She's able to make it in time and first gushes about her date. Susan loves this. Susan begins to break her news, her hands shaking, but Will suddenly gets a phone call. This is about when Haylin is having a meltdown over Eric. Susan lets her go, but is sad that she didn't give her her news. They hope to meet at her office later. We find Susan happily looking over travel brochures and thinking about Dean with a huge smile on her face. She rereads a note from him that says, "The most wonderful journey is the one we're about to go on together." Susan is called to a meeting, and Will shows up to wait for her. She looks happily at a photo of Susan and Dean. She finds the travel brochures and starts to get excited. This must be what her mother has been trying to tell her. A trip for her and Will and maybe Dean. Will sees it's time for Matt's concert and runs, and her and Susan clash on the way out. Matt dedicates the concert to Will. A day or so later, Will tells Matt about seeing travel brochures and feels sad she hasn't let Susan tell her. He suggests buying Susan a gift as an apology. Also, Will has made a connection with Sheila, that she'd sent a demo of Matt's band to Carmilla. Matt is ecstatic. He starts to daydream a collab. He and Will share a sweet moment before swim practice. The day after Cornelia and Irma refused to work with Sheila, Will is telling Susan about it, and she gives her her gift, a disposable camera, for the trip. Susan sees it's time for the news now. Will quickly figures out the trip is just for Dean and Susan. She's fine with it and imagines a house party. No one we know seems to be present. Susan has more to say, though. She begins cautiously. Her and Dean have decided to get married. Will looks shocked and grabs the phone. Susan starts to panic. Dean answers, and Will thinks it's a great idea. There's relief and joy all around. Susan uses the camera to take a new photo of her and Will, like the one on her desk. They're beginning a new chapter in their lives. When the girls are painting a sign for Sheffield's 100th anniversary and Sheila goes to say hi to Matt, she compliments Matt and Cobalt Blue's work. He gives her their demo CD for Carmilla. Cornelia tells Will to keep an eye on Sheila. And we see more growth from Will. Will isn't jealous or worried, mostly because she sent him to chat with her anyways. Matt was nervous about giving the demo. Cornelia is surprised at Will's joyous reaction. Later, plot drama is making Will sad. Matt tickles Will, and they're about to kiss when Susan calls. She won't be able to make it home in time for their engagement celebration dinner with Dean. She tells Will to call him and cancel. Instead, Will recruits Matt to help cook. It goes chaotically. The oven and the microwave fight over their importance. Matt bails before the dishes even get done. He's got to pick his books up at the shop, after all. Matt says, "They're first, I love you," and they kiss. Will is so joyed that she can't resist another hug. He walks out into the peaceful afternoon air. Sometime that evening, Dean shows up thinking dinner is on like normal. He notices the smoke. Dean and Will share a cute moment where he airs out the apartment and she opens a gift from him, a documentary on frogs. She's grateful and says it's such a teacher gift. They decide to order takeout and surprise Susan. As the sun sets, she arrives to a beautifully candlelit table with lovely decorations provided by the Silver Dragon. Now, let's rewind. In the background of all this life, the plot builds slowly. And I mean slowly. And Darno arrives to tell Himrish that the congregation is ready for him to be reinstated as Oracle. He reflects on the events of the previous arc, that he had to lose himself to find himself again. He thinks to himself that the events of the previous arc planted seeds for stories yet to bloom. He peers into the water nearby and sees Matt share a flower with Will, a moment of peace of mind. Caleb and Elion, with their hands touching as they overlook Meridian, a moment of hope. Irma and Joel passing by the cracked windows of the old bookshop we know well, a moment of friendship. He thinks that each of these moments he's seen are moving toward unknown futures. Futures that even he can't predict. His face reflects on the window of the bookshop beside the closed sign. It turns out that Cedric didn't get very far and was captured before leaving Kandrakar. He's returned to the Tower of Mists. This time, we know it's got a bed at least. He has frequent nightmares of being captured. It's unclear how long Cedric has been imprisoned before the Oracle approaches him. He has decided to let him walk free, without his magic, and to live in Heatherfield. This was a tough decision, but we don't know exactly why he's done it. He compliments Cedric, saying if he could see through his wrath, his judgment and abilities would be far better off. Later, we see the closed sign of Cedric's old bookshop flip from closed to open. There's been a new development with the management of Kandrakar. Himrish has decided to share the power of Kandrakar between 3 people, himself, Yenlin, and Indarno. This is the first time the position of Oracle has been split. This is called a triumvirate. The mark of Kandrakar is seared into his skin again. He says he's learned from Phobos' mistakes, that a true leader knows that you are always learning. A small creature appears at his ankle. He says it followed him from Basiliad, but not even Arube knows what it is. He gives him to Arube, saying the fortress is too peaceful for him to stay. He claims this might help Arube from being homesick. If you haven't seen it yet, I covered the Arube special that goes into her Earth experiences before this. But for a quick catch-up, she's now an actual college student studying journalism. She has a new job at a magazine. Irma makes fun of what her resume could possibly have said. That's also in that video. The girls briefly worry about Arube writing about them in the paper. We see Arube nervous to enter the office of her professor, trying to remember anything that Will taught her about human behavior. Now, back to this creature. It can turn invisible, except for its tail, and Arube seems allergic to him. Now the Oracle turns to the Guardians. He says the way they handled the mission of the previous arc, that they are ready for something big. That they will need to keep an eye on Cedric. He says that Cedric has been a slave under hate and thirst for power, but that his betrayal of Phobos intrigued him. Irma says it must be for power. Taranee believes it was vindictiveness, and Will believes he betrayed Phobos in fear. Regardless, Himrish thinks Cedric can be rehabilitated. A second chance. The girls aren't happy. Himrish thinks to himself, unsure if doing this is wisdom or insanity. He looks over at Yanlin and Indarno and wonders if the girls can even handle this task. Will steps forward with confidence. They can do it. Irma asks that they get a reward. The Oracle, as they still call him, says yes. But then in riddle says, the seed lies in the soil a long time before it becomes a sprout. Classic. A chunk of time later, Arube is holding a party. They note her home's new decor. Her neighbor, Ray, helped her. As the creature sits on the couch, they notice the letters W and E on his feet, and they call him We. Brief aside, this arc features the 50th issue of Witch and was released with an additional side magazine called Welcome, emphasis on We. Arube's human guests have only seen Wee's tail because he does the invisible thing. A guy named Josh is over. He's the fireman that came to put out the fire in Arube's in Arc 3. According to the Arube special, he is definitely into her. Arube seems unaware of Josh and Ray's feelings toward her, though, or at least indifferent. They order pizza and Martin delivers it. Irma invites him in. She feels guilty not seeing him as much. He spills a drink and Irma goes to clean it up. She sees a book in the small puddle before it quickly disappears. She's left shaken. Now Arube has an announcement. The reason for the party. She's gotten a job at a popular magazine. Ray tells Arube that anyone can see she's talented. Josh thinks he's being deceitful. I know it's supposed to show jealousy, but it makes it look like Josh doesn't believe Arube is talented. They toast. This is also where Taranee announces she made it into the dance school. Josh says he saw the old bookstore has reopened downtown. Maybe Arube can research there. We see her marvel at the shop window display not long after. Cedric stands there with his fists clenched, but we don't get to see this first visit in detail. The Oracle calls the girls. He has magical cards that have a message for them. Irma sasses that they were called to play cards. Indarno tells her to behave, but the Oracle shrugs it off. This is just Irma's nature. The Oracle explains that the elements have summoned them, speaking through these transfiguring cards. He says a great change is coming, and the elements have a question. Are you ready? Ready to make a change in their missions as guardians. That change happens with all things, even Kandrakar. We know this based on the Witch special, 5 Witch, that I covered also, or Core of Kandrakar. New choices will be coming, and the elements feel that no group before them has been as powerful or as united as this one, but they aren't sure if they can handle the coming challenge. The cards circle Will. She says she doesn't know, and that all of this is so sudden and vague. The Oracle agrees that the past must first be understood, that Will has yet to know the strength of her bond with the heart, and then adds that Cornelia and Taranee have questions of their own. They are surprised about this. He takes them again to the Chamber of Spirits, to the Breath of Time, to view the past and the future. The Oracle says that there are infinite variations of the past and the future, and they are here to view one of each. Which is strange considering last arc he told Will that no one, not even he, could see the future. Unless this is a special case and he meant he can't view the absolute certain future. He says the view of the past will help Will, and the view of the future will help Cornelia and Taranee. Will wonders about not having taken the heart of Kandrakar. Haylin is surprised that Will sometimes ponders that. Will says she thought they did too. The sands churn. We see a remake of some of the original artwork of issue 1. I'll put the original alongside the new ones for comparison. We are brought to the moment Yanlin is presenting the heart. So far, it's a recap until we get to Will. She freaks out, yelling no. Irma and Haylin are surprised. Will is mortified, shaking, saying this isn't happening, and runs away. Yanlin takes back their powers, saying there is no group of guardians without a heart. Irma and Haylin yell at her outside for refusing. Taranee is confused, and Cornelia is still thinking it was a crazy magic trick. Irma laments that they could have been a supergroup. Haylin comes up with the group name, but says to forget it. In our timeline, Haylin is amazed she would have been so dreary. It also turns out that somehow Elion has been corrupted by Cedric, but because they aren't guardians, nothing bad happens? I was a little confused about the wording here. He says to keep watching. Cornelia and Irma are fighting. The group is split 2 to 3. about being guardians. It makes sense since Haylin and Irma have always wanted to be magical or special, and the others have always wanted peace and stability. Normalcy. Later, in chemistry class, Taranee is drawn to the flame. She reaches out, and we next find her in the nurse's office with a burn. The other girls are there too, with the sensations of burns. Irma explains what happened to her. That she tripped on Martin, and when Andrew Hornby went to help her, she started feeling a burning feeling in her hand, right when Taranee touched the fire. Later, everyone gets a vision of Matt from Will's perspective. Haylin walks into a tree because of it. Later that day, Will asks why they chose Heatherfield. Will's mom reminds her of the radio in the special the year before that I covered recently, but also says she had a friend named Heather Shield, a good friend that she grew apart from. She chose here because it brought her fond memories of Heather. Meanwhile, Irma eats a load of cream puffs. By the way, her brother is looking way too old here. Anyway, we see Haylin get a stomachache around this time. Downstairs, her father burns some fat, which is smelly in a gross way, but she smells flowers. Cornelia has sniffed some at home. Will is theorizing on these crossover sensations when Cornelia hears loud music, but it was what Haylin was listening to across town. They all meet up. They've been connecting through the 5 senses, united as one. Will's fear is gone, replaced by security in her group. Her heart shines from within her. It was never truly gone. Will says they still became guardians anyway. Just days later, the Oracle states that no matter how it went down, they were destined to be guardians. If you recall, in the Core of Kandrakar special, he said only Will's place was destined for certain, and then after the test said the other girls were destined, but it's very confusing. It seems like Will has a very special reason for being a guardian, and I'm going to theorize on that at some point, but I want to keep reading a little bit more to see if we're given any more information first. He brings up Nerissa's group and says that they would not have endured the change the elements demand. And it sounds like that would have been the case if Nerissa hadn't gone rogue. Will wonders why the elements want to test them again, referring to the Core of Kandrakar special. The Oracle recites the lesson he learned last arc. To grow, one must continually question themselves. Taranee and Cornelia know their question now. What if they decide to live normal lives? Irma is amazed they've considered this. The sands of time rush forward. Taranee has become a dance instructor. This student clearly has a crush. I think they're around their early 20s in this vision. Haylin has become a flight attendant, and Taranee picks her up from the airport. Haylin refuses a party invitation from the pilot. Haylin says that she never wants to come back down, and they joke about the old days when she could truly fly. Irma works at an aquarium. She seems to be able to understand the dolphins in a supernatural way. Taranee and Haylin show up and they say hi. They all haven't seen each other in a while. Irma skipped eating today and broke up with a recent dark-haired boyfriend. A vehicle screeches into the parking lot, dripping in mud. Cornelia, the park ranger, has arrived. Irma scolds her reckless driving. Haylin is amazed at how Cornelia has changed. Also, apparently her father has been pushing her to work in banks instead, and Cornelia is uncomfortable when she says her dad doesn't think she can make her own decisions. They are headed to meet Will at Miss Rudolph's house, and Taranee says they should celebrate because today is the anniversary of them giving up their powers. Then they discuss their eternal gifts, something they got to keep regarding their power. Irma, as we've seen, can somewhat communicate with sea creatures, or at least understand them. Taranee jokes that isn't the only reason she went to vet school, that she went because of a blonde guy she later dumped. They don't remember his name. Taranee's gift is the gift of always being warm. Haylin can predict the weather, and Cornelia has got a green thumb. However, they say Will doesn't seem to have an eternal gift. Cornelia's phone rings. It's Peter, and we learn he and Cornelia are engaged. We finally see Will. The girls say she's the only one not having a happy life and that she's living at Miss Rudolph's old house, and is currently getting kicked out. Funny enough, Andrew Hornby is the real estate agent, and he tries to tell Irma to get Will to chill. They've never had documents saying the house was theirs and that Rebecca Rudolph disappeared years ago. Back to Basiliade, apparently. Cornelia pulls Will away. Taranee notes that Andrew is more tame when Irma's around. Irma fights to be let in to gather their things. She succeeds. Taranee wonders if he remembers being turned into a toad back in Arc 1. We learn that Matt and Will broke up when they discuss a writing desk that was a gift from him. Martin shows up to help. He and Irma recently ran into each other at a grocery store, and she invited him. Cornelia marvels at how Andrew Hornby became a buffoon, while Martin, her thought trails off, as Martin drops a table on his foot, and she thinks, never mind. Irma goes to comfort Martin, and everyone gives her knowing looks. Irma blushes and tells them to stop staring. They spend the rest of the day packing. They lament that it would have gone much faster with their powers. We see our Will unhappy about this future. Irma looks pensive. The Oracle reminds them that this is only a possible future, and not the future. He reminds Irma that normal life isn't always boring as she believes. We again view the future vision. Heylin mocks the day her grandmother presented the heart by reenacting it while giving tea to the girls. Will calls her out, and Heylin says she's probably laughing in Kandrakar. Will has an announcement, what she calls her eternal gift. She's written a book about their adventures, or at least inspired by, called Forever Magic, like this chapter. While moving boxes, Martin discovered Will's manuscript. She's been given a big check from a publishing company. Will wants to use it to rebuy Miss Rudolph's house. That's all we see of the future. The girls later discuss that seeing these potential visions only created more uncertainties. Irma spots Martin and is overjoyed. She gives him a peck on the cheek and a bonk on the head. Cornelia laughs at her methods, and Irma vows to be happy and single forever. Taranee observes that in the future, without powers, they stayed united, as if they are united by more than elements. In Kandrakar, the triumvirate meets, and Darno would have preferred they give no guidance, while Yanlin would have preferred more. Himrish says his goal for the girls is to consider power greater than Kandrakar at work. He says that the elements chose the girls as guardians, maybe the first case of this. He also says they want to give the girls one destiny, and that the change they've been waiting for has already begun. The cards we saw earlier now feature our girls, where before they were generic. The next chapter opens on a mansion atop a hill, and a voice saying, "They'll buy it all." A hand touches a book. The voice echoes loudly in Irma's mind as she sinks underwater with no sign of moving, frozen in fear. Joel swims down to her. Her trance is broken. She first thinks that Cornelia will call her crazy, or that she hurt her brain studying. Then she tries hard to recognize the voice. She's heard it and realizes it was Cedric. We finally get to see Cedric. He stares with hatred at his human appearance. He feels weak and ashamed without his powers. He punches the mirror and bleeds. He thinks this is worse than prison or torture. He returned to the shop, hoping to rekindle some professional connections in an effort to find occult texts to regain his magic, or even reopen a portal to Meridian. No luck, though. He's so frustrated that he burns a large mountain of books. His hatred builds, vowing to harm the Guardians in vengeance. The smoke takes their form. He hopes to strike undetected. He catches a fly for emphasis. Suddenly, Matt enters the bookshop. Cedric fears he'll be recognized from his attack last arc, and it almost looks like this will happen, but of course Matt doesn't remember. This pleases Cedric, and he offers Matt help with a smile. Supposedly, something similar happened when Irube showed up at the shop. But while they both know of each other, Cedric pretended all was well. Irube blushes at the memory of suddenly seeing him. Irube starts to say that Cedric has a unique look, but it hints that she thinks he's handsome, but brushes it off as being from another world. Will catches this and says she doesn't need to explain herself, and she remembers how Elion was swept up in his charm and beauty, but that his true form is a lizard creature. While researching for her job, Irube came across the name of Jonathan Ludmore. She says his name comes up frequently in mysterious ways. Will pays this no mind, to Irube's dismay. But then, Irube takes the opportunity to gloat that she is going to know more about Heatherfield than Will. Irube is about to say she wants to learn more about Ludmore, but Will jokingly interjects that she wants to learn more about Knickerbocker for some reason, probably because she was talking about history. Irube is annoyed. Dean is walking down the stairs, and Will suggests he can help her research in Heatherfield's history. They don't meet with Dean today, as Irube needs to study, and Will has a date with Matt. Time passes, and we see Will stressing out about writing an answer she doesn't know on the chalkboard. As her fists clench and the chalk screeches, the lights flicker out. Her stress peaks, and the lights go out completely, and don't come back on. The fire alarm goes off, and the school is evacuated, and closed for the day. The group finds each other as they leave school, and Will looks dejected, as Irma jokes about Will being responsible for the blackout. Which is funny because the panel before this, they drew Will looking very happy. We also see Irma pondering why she's afraid to talk about the visions she's been having. She still doesn't tell them. They decide to meet at Irube's, and that's where Will admits she inadvertently caused the blackout. She says she felt a wave of heat and anger just before it happened. As you know, There isn't anything going on right now in the plot or the relationship to make Will feel this much anger. Then again, she is a teenager, so I guess being embarrassed in class is enough. This is when Irma, Heylin, and Taranee all indicate that their powers have been weird too. Again, Heylin can detect lies, Irma is having visions, and Taranee can hear everyone's thoughts. She also brings out the burn she accidentally gave herself at the dance audition. Cornelia takes her hand to look, and suddenly, she's healing it. This was just now discovered by everyone, even Cornelia. Cornelia noted that the oracle said, one must always question themselves to grow and change. Irma makes a joke about the oracle's height, and Cornelia yells at her. This causes Irma to start shouting about them never getting answers anyway, and the cards the oracle had aren't giving them clear messages, and she even gripes about Cedric. We also get an update on Irma at the meeting. She's been feeling exhausted after her editor meetings, and she left W.I.T.C.H at the office. Her boss discovered him, and he is now their office mascot. Strange, since they normally try to keep things like this secret. Will invites Irma over for dinner that evening, so they could learn more about Jonathan Ludmore from Dean. Heylin is also invited because she's in a funk about Eric. Will and Heylin have no intention of listening, and start to leave to watch a movie. But they stay when Dean mentions Ludmore's Book of Elements, a book that supposedly became magical as Ludmore recorded his discoveries. The legend goes, Ludmore lived in Heatherfield long ago, but he'd appeared from out of nowhere. People thought he might have come from another planet, that his goal was to weaken a veil by opening portals between this world and his own. The girls realize Ludmore is more important to them than they thought. Dean adds that people saw creatures, even after Ludmore disappeared. Will and Heylin telepathically think of Meridian citizens escaping Phobos, which pulls into question the time difference between Earth and Metamor yet again. Ludmore discovered that Heatherfield lies on what's called a place where the 5 elements shine together and meet. Ludmore tried to suppress the elements, and the Book of Elements was where he tracked these efforts. One day, Ludmore disappeared, but the night it happened, 5 beams of light rose from his manor, like fireworks in 5 different colors, and then rained like comets in 5 different areas of Heatherfield. One to the sea, one to the mountain, one to the sky, another to the deep ground, and the last to the fields of heather. The Book of Elements sealed and can only be opened by finding the stones that these beams of light became. It is said that these were the positive essences of the elements, introducing the theory by Will that the elements have a good and evil side, and that the elements refused to be absorbed by Ludmore and hid. She also again questions the coincidence of the Guardians being in Heatherfield. I feel the need for a detour here to point out Susan reading a romance book, by the way, when Dean is talking, and then they start making eyes, that they snuck this in here. Anyway, let's see what Cedric's up to. A message arrives and he takes it quickly. A home with possibly valuable books is about to be on the market. The home happens to be Villa Ludmore. As Cedric rides a cab to the manor, he feels ill, dozing off and sweating profusely, saying to the driver that he's gotten little sleep lately. He thought he heard the driver moan in his ear, apparently, and then the cab screeches to a halt and drives no closer. He seems spooked by the manor, but I'm sure Cedric's comment kind of startled him. The manor and its garden happen to remind him of Meridian. He crunches a rose in his hand until he bleeds. The manor appears to take a deep breath. The groundkeeper lets Cedric in, and to me, he looks suspiciously like the guy that discovered Ludmore's disappearance, but he could just be a descendant. They enter a huge library that leaves Cedric speechless. This, too, reminds him of Meridian. The groundskeeper tells Cedric to take whatever he wishes. They'll be demolishing the place soon, after all. He's left alone, and a beam of light shines on a particular book. Cedric goes to investigate and discovers the book is warm, like a living being. Meanwhile, we see the girls talking about the washing machine exploding at Will's house, mentioned earlier in the video. Will admits that with their powers being out of control lately, she ran out of the house because she was afraid of hurting her mother. Likely she feared electrocuting her by accident in the water. They've met to explore the new effects of their powers, except for Heylin, who is currently depressed about Eric. They're in a secluded forest area, but Cornelia suggests that they practice in a crowded area due to the nature of these new abilities. Irma tells the girls about the strange visions she's been having. The other night, she had a nightmare that made her sweaty and restless. She couldn't recall what it was about until she saw images in the sink full of water. A giant flying eye monster carrying a guitar while flying over a, quote, town of stuff. Taranee and Cornelia start laughing, and Will thinks of Matt immediately. She calls him to make sure he's okay. He's fine and actually studying at Cedric's bookshop. So, of course, Cedric chastises him to turn off his phone. Matt notices that Cedric is extra mean to him, but he doesn't know about Cedric yet. Cedric is unsure if Matt knows who he is, though. Since Matt was fine, Will feels silly and thinks Irma's visions are just that, silly. Irma specifies she never mentioned Matt being in danger specifically. The books from Ludmore's manor have arrived. Cedric took more than just that one book, so the groundskeeper wouldn't be suspicious, but now it feels cold to him. He throws it down in frustration. He starts to despair and leans on a bookcase for support. He feels like a fool for thinking he'd found something magical. He just wants to get back home to Meridian. He even left a wall empty, hoping for a portal to take its place someday. He begins shaking the shelf in frustration. He turns his anger from himself towards the Guardians. He blames them for his sad state. He vows to destroy everything they love, erase all of their sureness, and remove meaning from their existences, like they did to him. He leers at Matt from his back room, thinking he'll start his revenge with him, and as he thinks his name, the eye on the mysterious book opens. Some days later, Irma arrives at the shop. Cedric shouts from another room that they're closed. He comes out and looks surprised. He says hello, calling her Miss Rudolph, and tries to recall her last name. He does. She then says her true name, Arube, and he says, of course, in a bit of a daze. Arube notices he looks like he's been crying. His tone of voice seems lifeless, his knuckles are red and bruised, and she knows he's been punching things. She leaves in the middle of his sentence. He was just absently rambling anyways. Cedric is bothered by this and thinks she could have at least said goodbye before shaking his head, thinking the air must be making him sick. The next second, a cappuccino is on the table, and he's startled to see Arube beside it. He asks how she got in without him noticing, and she says that's a skill of hers. He gruffly asks what she wants, and she tells him to drink the cappuccino. It's from the cafe across the street. She asks if he's ever gone, and he says he has no interest in exploring even an inch of this planet. After some coaxing, she gets him to take a sip. He doesn't like it, and she laughs. She doesn't like them either. This makes Cedric laugh. He lightly coughs and more sweetly asks what she's here for. She's here for a book she saw before. A book, she tells him, that mentions a man named Ludmore. Cedric looks toward his back room. He's recently reorganized it, so it may be hard to find. He offers to find them and set them aside. They leave the shop together. He lets her out the door and muses that the only thing he appreciates about humans is manners. Arube jokes, asking which century he means. As he closes the door, he asks her to tell him more about Ludmore. The book's eye opens again as they leave. An image of the eye appears in the sky, searching for someone. The eye spots the girls in guardian form at the market, where they're trying to practice their abilities. Will is admitting to Irma that she feels safer and more in control of her power while transformed. Irma brings up that they should learn more about Ludmore, that his interaction with the elements and Heatherfield must be significant. Will hears none of this because she's doing funny background stuff like stopping a pickpocket. Cornelia spots Peter and drags Taranee off with her. Will spots Matt and bolts. Irma follows her. Cornelia asks Taranee to read Peter's mind. Clearly something risque was thought, but Taranee says she didn't hear Peter's thoughts, but instead Cornelia's thoughts. It was probably scarring either way anyways. This is also where Will sees Matt try to buy the CD she buys him later for their month-iversary. A fire suddenly erupts. Will tells Irma to put it out, but she's frozen in fear. How can Will not see what she does in the nearby puddle? Meanwhile, Matt is looking for Peter. They came here together. The eye glares at him, and a flaming umbrella nearly falls on him. Haylin arrives from almost nowhere, her hair flying free. She's been home crying about Eric. She fiercely grabs the wind that's fanning the flames and declares it to stop. Shortly before this is when she sends a tear out on the wind, asking the wind to stop Eric from leaving, foreshadowingly thinking to herself that it might not be the best to trust some things to the wind. She's here now because she wanted to stop crying, according to her. This fire could likely be her fault, and not the giant eyes. It may just be taking advantage of the situation, but now that the wind is gone, Taranee can finally control the fire. The other side of the market is still flaming. Matt is still in danger. A flaming umbrella nearly takes him out again, but Will stops it with a shield and lets Matt know she's there. Peter got a burn that Cornelia secretly heals. Matt drops Will off to chat with Irma. Will asks Irma why she froze, and she says she was purely afraid. She felt like she was being watched, and still feels the eye upon her. Later that day, Matt calls Cedric's shop to place some books on hold. Matt is aggressive and says that Cedric knows who he is, and hangs up. Cedric realizes that Will told Matt who he is. They know something is up, and they know that he is the only known threat right now. Cedric thinks Matt must not feel threatened if he keeps utilizing the bookshop. He picks the book from Ludmore Manor off the floor and thinks it really must be special now that Arube told him the legend of Ludmore. He analyzes it and sees empty slots and that the eye is now open. He wonders why the book let him discover it after all these years while it's existed. The light goes out and he thinks for a second that he heard a voice speaking in the dialect of Metamore. He shrugs it off as being homesick until the book speaks again, saying it's pleased to meet him. Cedric speaks back in the language of Meridian, asking for the book's name, its identity. The book scoffs, saying, "Haven't you figured it out yet? You're mine," as blue light like flames form the eye. The next time we see Cedric, he's wearing his traditional Meridian garb, and he's apparently made a tiny chess set of the Guardians. The Oracle, Tibor, and a random congregation member. The book and Cedric are about to make a deal. The creature within the book wishes to be set free. In exchange, it will give Cedric new powers. In order to be set free, though, the 5 magical stones missing from the cover must be returned. Which is funny because they've been drawn in on the cover from here onward, where before they were actually empty niches. The caveat is that only elemental beings can retrieve the stones. Regrettably, he must work with the Guardians. Cedric demands more information from the book. How exactly will it give his powers back? The book flashes at him to be quiet. All will be known when the time comes. The next time we see Cedric, Matt has arrived to pick up the books he put on hold a few days ago, but Will shows up before he can begin the purchasing. Matt decides to come back another time. They're trying to spend as much time of their month-versary together as possible. Cedric watches them through the window, thinking that love is an illness, that it's revolting. Later that night, he's back in Meridian robes. He's pondering over his deal with the book and starts to feel skeptical that it even happened. And he rushes to the basement. He starts to think, why should he blindly obey a book when it won't tell him how he'll get his powers back? Cedric shudders as the book speaks suddenly, saying that Cedric has no choice in the matter. He erupts in rage. The book read his thoughts and refuses to answer his questions. Then he falls to his knees in frustration. He feels like he's going insane talking to a book after all. He throws the book and then tries to force its pages open. In response, the book shoots a beam at him and creates a tornado. When everything quiets, Cedric sees that the book was embedded into the wall. The book calls him a foolish mortal, and to consider himself lucky that he wasn't sucked in, as mortals who try to open it will be. Cedric lunges angrily. He's not a mortal, he shouts. He stops, tears running down his face, human tears of fury and despair. He thinks of Phobos and remembers that, just like with him, he has no control over the situation. The next day, Cedric is shivering and sweating and wonders if he's got a fever. He's also got a bad headache. He wonders why the book didn't imprison him. The girls are here to work on a celebration plan for the 100th anniversary of Sheffield Institute. He watches from his back room, despising that he'll need to ally with them to open the book. After Irma and Cornelia ditch, when Sheila arrives, Cedric scolds them for making too much noise. He tells them that this isn't the mall and he can throw them out at any time. A voice says,
Hello there.
And he looks startled. Arube has arrived. The narration tells us that Cedric relaxes to her voice, filling with calm and serenity. He trembles and his mouth goes dry, his heart pounds, and his stomach is jittery. His hands sweat and he drops the book he's holding, leaving fingerprints where he once had none. The narration says he is now human, a change he has trouble accepting. Cedric's got a crush. It takes the girls more than a few days after the market incident to seek counsel from Kandrakar. The Oracle winces at Ludmore's name. He looks back toward Yanlin and Andarno, thinking that he knew certain events of the past would come back to haunt him. He wishes he didn't have to face this, but has to. He says what he's about to say will be confusing. That this has to do with Kandrakar's, quote, dark times. He goes on to say Ludmore was from Meridian, a servant of Phobos. Phobos told Ludmore to go to Earth and weaken the veil. He created the 12 portals in Heatherfield. Once completed, Ludmore stayed and began research on the elements. The Oracle stops there. The girls are furious. This only makes more questions. Why are their powers out of control? Why is Heatherfield special? What does it mean that there is good and evil within the elements? He only says this is the work of the elements themselves, and he doesn't know more than that. I want to note that Ludmore appeared in Heatherfield in like the 17th century or something, and Phobos was existing. So again, how old is he? And also, what does he mean by Kandrakar's dark times? After leaving Will to finish dinner for her mom and Dean, Matt goes to pick up his books. Cedric is surprised, but thinks of him as a pest. He's about to close the shop. He's concocted a plan. No one else is around. He's still craving revenge, and he thinks this is the perfect opportunity. He tells Matt his books are in the basement and tells him to follow. Matt sees the book on the wall and is immediately suspicious of it. Cedric knew Matt would be curious about the book. Matt asks how it got in the wall. He tells him it's none of his business. The air is tense. Cedric knows Matt will touch the book once he steps away, and Matt plans to. Thinking Cedric fumbled by bringing him here. He wants to protect Will, after all. Cedric pretends he needs to make an urgent phone call right now and tells him to wait here. Matt barely waits 2 seconds before taking the bait. At the same time, Will is having dinner, happily scarfing down sashimi. I know it says steamed fish, but ignore it. That's sashimi. Matt pries the book open, and light pours out. Will begins coughing. Susan and Dean aren't sure how serious it is yet. Blue energy swirls around Matt's arms, and a beam strikes his face. Will struggles to breathe in tandem. Susan and Dean are growing concerned. Matt looks to Cedric in fear, begging for help. He watches with a twisted smile. A blinding light grows from the bookshop before wiping out all of the power nearby, likely all of Heatherfield. Will falls from her chair, her coughing fit over. She can breathe again. Susan and Dean hold her close and comfort her. Meanwhile, Cedric celebrates. The journey to setting the book free and gaining his powers has begun. At the Vandums, they're lighting more candles and talking about the blackout. Dean suggests they eat the ice cream before it melts. Will goes to get it and interrupts a kiss. As they're about to dig in, Will's cell phone rings. It's Cedric.
Obviously, I can't give too much thought until we finish it up in part 2, but I do want to say I love how lore-based this arc is. It's not just another random planet that they're going to, like in arc 3. Once again, we're tying back to Phobos, which is interesting. I love that we also got to see a alternative past and a possible future for the girls. That was really cool and fun. And I'm so excited that Dean and Susan are getting married. And of course, I'm here for anything Cedric and Arube. This has been Arc 5, Part 1. Catch you soon for Part 2.